Can't get enough of Team Pete? Well, you've come to the right place, as each week I interview supporters of Pete Buttigieg, former candidate for President of the United States and current Secretary of Transportation. Hear their personal stories about why they became part of Team Pete and how they started a movement. Join us as we talk Pete, politics, and anything in between. Hello, everyone. My name is Kim Ang, and I'm the host of this podcast, Talking with Team Pete. And today, my guest is Linda. Hi, Linda. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thank you. Thanks for joining me today. Can you tell everyone a little bit about yourself and how you joined Team Pete?
So I currently live in the San Francisco Bay Area, although I was born and raised in Taiwan, so I come from an immigrant family. But I've been in the Bay Area for a long time now. And I would say what got me involved, I can actually trace all the way back to 2018 when Brett Kavanaugh was going through his confirmation hearings. I always kind of think back, like, when did I become activated to want to become involved politically? And I remember back to that moment when the week of his hearing and listening to Dr. Ford give her testimonies and just the way she was treated during those hearings and just the amount of vitriol that came from the side that is opposing her testimonies and really want to confirm Brett Kavanaugh. It just affected me so much as a woman, as a voter, as a concerned citizen. And I remember that at the end of that whole saga, when he got confirmed, I actually had an incident outside of my apartment with somebody who was illegally parking on my garage. And I went to confront this person, and they just acted as if they did nothing wrong and was yelling at me and say, "Hey, I can go call the cops on you right now," or like just something really ridiculous. And then I kind of realized that this person was gaslighting me, like right outside my own home. And I remember after that incident, I just completely broke down. Like, I think I was like hyperventilating. And I've never been that upset. So I think the hearings really like trigger something inside me. And then having a incident with a white male person treating me the way that he did, it just kind of something just kind of broke open inside me. And I remember that was the moment where I felt like something's not right and I should do something about it. If I'm this upset about what's going on in our country. And so when the 2020 presidential primaries season started rolling around, I thought this is a good time for me to get involved with something. But I just wasn't sure what it would be at that point. I really didn't know who to support. And, everybody is very concerned, like, who's going to beat Trump? Who has the best option to beat Trump? And I was like, I have no idea. And I remember I was watching Stephen Colbert, the late night talk show host. And so I've been a fan for years. And Mayor Pete, he was Mayor Pete at the time, and he was a guest on Stephen Colbert. And I have no idea who he was, could not pronounce his name. And so I was just like, okay, I'll just watch this. And there was just something about him during that specific interview when it was my very first time coming across him that just struck me as, wow, this is a person who was just really, really thoughtful. And with the way he responded to all the questions, and I have never really kind of encountered somebody of that age be just really articulate, very thoughtful in the way he was responding to just like very typical questions. And so then he kind of stuck with me that this person may be something worth checking out. And then so I started reading about him, started watching video clips about him, and started learning just more about him. And he hasn't officially announced his campaign at that time, so it was still like very early on. But somehow I just thought, wow, this is a very promising sort of candidate, and the fact that he's put himself out there like that is very impressive for somebody much younger than I am. And so when he officially announced his campaign, I went to a watch party in San Francisco to see the announcement, and that was really cool. And then I kind of just didn't look back after that point. Then I thought, I think this is the candidate for me. That I really liked everything he was saying. I really liked the values that he stood for, and especially the rules of the road. Is that what they were called? Rules of the road. Yeah. He had all of these values that he wanted to embody his campaign around, and that really struck with me. That those are all really admirable values that I like to have in my life as well. And so I think that's what set him apart. Not anything specific policy wise, because I'm not like a policy wonk, but it's the way he carried himself and the values that he projected, and just this level of intelligence and thoughtfulness that I was really drawn to. And so from there, I thought, okay, I really want to support this candidate. And so, what should I do after that point? And then I came across some local groups here in the Bay Area that was supporting him. And so I decided to get involved with them. I'm sorry, that was a very, very long answer. Did you need to sneak in more questions?
No, that's fine. No, I love it. I didn't want to interrupt you because I was just trying to see where the story was going. No, that's great. I love it.
Okay.
And so, cool. So this was the first time you've ever done anything politically, right?
Yeah. I'm trying to think. I might have done I think I did some letter writing for the 2018 midterms, because at that point, the whole Kavanaugh fiasco had happened. And so I think I've done some very minimal letter writing for maybe some key races in the 18 midterms, but not very involved. So it wasn't really until 2018 when Pete came along, and when I decided I want to support his campaign, that I put in a lot more time and energy. Yeah.
So how did your family feel about that?
Well, let's see. So my family here is just my husband, and he is like-minded in terms of political values and all of that stuff. But he definitely isn't driven by any kind of activism where you have to go do something. And so he wouldn't do it with me, but he's always supportive of what I decide to do. But it just really did take up a lot of time eventually. And then so I always have to be cognizant of like how much time that this is taking up in my life. But he was always supportive of what I decided to do. And he himself liked Pete, but I don't think he ended up supporting Pete, and that's totally fine. So I was very thankful that he gave me the space and the time to do that. And I even traveled to Vegas to, campaign for him for the Nevada caucuses. And so that was a really big deal that he said, go if you need to go. So I was really grateful for that. So when I first wanted to get involved, like I wasn't sure what's out there. And so I think I just did some quick search of any groups out there that is like-minded. And then I came across SF Pete. So that was the first group that I found. And and I live close enough to San Francisco, and so I started showing up at their meetings. Oh, I remember now. They organized a contingent in the Pride Parade in 2019, and so they actually had a really good turnout for the Pride Parade, and so I went with them and like marched in the parade, and then so got to meet more people there. And then,
that's nice.
Yeah,
I didn't know you were there.
It was really cool. Yeah, and then so I think I might have also gone to another Pride Parade with some people elsewhere. But the one in San Francisco was pretty big, and so then I just kind of got involved with like the organizing that was happening in San Francisco. But the more I kind of got involved with them, the more I was thinking, shouldn't I do this closer to home? You know, aren't there other peace supporters where I am too? And then so I eventually got connected with a couple of key folks here in the Peninsula area. And then so we all got together, and then we formed Peninsula for Pete. And so I was like one of the early people that started that group. And then so we started tabling at farmers markets, and started kind of just letting folks know who he is. And so the San Mateo Farmers Market in particular was like a hotspot, I guess. And so Bernie had his people there. Elizabeth Warren had her people there. Andrew Yang had the people there. So it was actually like quite friendly that for several weeks, like all of these campaigns were there. And then we were all very friendly with each other and got to like chat with all the different supporters. And then all the people who were visiting could learn multiple campaigns at the same time. And so that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Oh, and then once the debates started happening, I also helped organize watch party for the debates. And then I think you came to one or two, right? Yeah, so that happened a few times. I think I maybe tabled at a couple of official Pete fundraisers that Pete for America people were, of course, organizing. And then so I went to a couple of them, and I had a little table set up for Peninsula for Pete. And one of those fundraisers was where I met Pete for the first time. And so this was in, I want to say maybe it was in Hillsborough. So it was like a very wealthy neighborhood here in the Peninsula. And so I went as a guest of someone in our group because this person is the mother of someone who worked for Pete for America. Somebody on the finance team, I think, is the son of somebody in our group. And so she brought me along as a guest. And then so that was my very first fancy political fundraiser that I ever been to, like catered food and everything. And yeah, that was my first time meeting Pete, and I was able to like get in the photo line to get a photo taken with him, and I just like got really intimidated when I got up close to him. Just because, like, you know, somebody you admire, right? Like once you get like too close to them, you know, then you're like, like don't say something stupid or embarrassing or whatever. So I just I shook his hand, and all I said was, I've been volunteering for your campaign here in the Bay Area, and we just really love you, really support you, hope you go all the way, or something like that. And he was just very, very nice. He said thank you, and he posed for a photo, so I have a photo with him from that event. And he was just a very gracious person, kind of just like what I had perceived him would be. So that was comforting to know that he wasn't like not willing to talk to you because you're not anybody important, you know. So I thought that was really good quality of his. And I had one experience that I remember very distinctly. I was with my fellow canvasser, and the two of us talked to this elderly lady, and she had heard of Pete, but her husband had just recently passed away. And that weekend, she was about to go pick up his ashes, and his remains to take it to wherever his resting place was. And so we just thought, she's obviously very busy. This is a very busy time of her life. But she was just like, oh, tell me when the caucus is. And so we told her the date, where's her nearest caucus location. And she was like, you know what? I think I can make it happen. I can go to the mortuary. I can go pick up the ashes, and then I can swing by the voting place and go vote. And I was like,
wow.
It's like, while she was in the midst of this like very, very big thing in her life, she still also prioritized voting.
Yeah.
And so I was very moved by that. And then so we just made sure that she had her plan. Like, she had a way of getting there. Like, what time is she going to get there? What time does it close? So we make sure she had her plan. And I'm just really hoping that she followed through with her plan and caucus for Pete.
Yeah.
So that was probably the most memorable from that trip. And then, so fast forward over to GOTV weekend in California. So we had the kickoffs with the lieutenant governor and all of that. And so then we were, dispersed into whatever neighborhoods that we were covering. And I wasn't planning on doing actual canvassing that day, just because I helped a lot with transporting things and setting up and all of this. And so I was like already like kind of tired. So I wasn't actually going to go canvass. And then so once I kind of broke down everything and figure out like, where I'm going to store everything at my house. And then then we got the news that Pete suspended his campaign. And all of us were just like, what? And so there was just like a huge flurry of text going on. I was like, what? Is this for real? And we're like, well, this came from the organizer, and she obviously would have the right information. And so that was just like just a weird day. And then so a lot of our supporters were like mid-sentence talking to voters, where they were like on their way to another house to talk to someone when this happened. And so everybody was just kind of dealing with this shock, I guess. And then later that day, a few of us got together at like a dive bar, like right in my neighborhood. Not far from me. And so a few of us gather there to just put back a few beers and be like, what the heck? What do we do? What happened? And then later on that night, Pete had a speech in South Bend. And so we stayed at the bar to watch his speech on the TV at the bar. And so I think it was good that we did that a few of us at least got that closure together that day, I guess.
How did you feel when you listened to that speech? Because I remember crying throughout and just so completely heartbroken.
I don't remember if I cried or not, but I think I was probably just still dealing with shock. But I remember that I was very moved by his poise and his grace, and that like Chasten was on the verge of breaking down. It seemed like,
Yeah.
But Pete was just centered and calm, and so it made me think that it probably had been in the works. Like he probably was prepared for that at some point. But just the way that he handled everything that day and how gracious he was, and how much he thanked his supporters, would always stay with me. That it's not the end, right? And then so after that point, I didn't really like move on to supporting any of the other candidates that remained. But I do remember that I struggled with how I was going to vote in the primary, since he has officially suspended, but his name was still on the ballot, you know. And there was all kinds of discussions of like, oh, you know, now you should vote for this and this and this, or whatever. And in the end, I decided I was going to vote for him, and so I voted for him. But that probably still gave him some delegates. I don't know how the math worked out or whatever. But I was okay with that decision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with all the campaigning and stuff that you did, what do you remember as being the best part about it?
I think the best part about it was just telling people who Pete was and who he is still today. Because there was still a lot of people who've never heard of him. You know, like he just had such low name ID that every single person that we talked to while we were tabling or canvassing or whatnot, like huge percentage of them never heard of him. And so just kind of just letting them know who he was and his credentials, his backgrounds, his experience, and the values that he stood for. And then just kind of seeing somebody also kind of feeling the same, that like, oh wow, this is somebody that could go pretty far, and yeah, sure, this is somebody who could be my president. Yeah, why not? So I think I enjoy that, and I don't think I've ever spoken with anybody who said they hated Pete for whatever reason. Anybody who had heard of him at some point or whatever, all seem to say he's a very impressive person. But I just don't know if we're ready for a president who is A, this young, 2, gay, and 3, 4, 5, whatever else, you know? So I will always just kind of give them my thoughts of why I would support someone who was young and gay and this many things. You know, it's like things would happen because people imagined it so, you know, like in the 60s, like people didn't think that you would ever have a Catholic president, and we had JFK, you know? So I always kind of saw it as that, you know, history would just kind of progress the way that it's going to progress. And I was ready to receive somebody like Pete as my president, and somebody else may not be ready at that point. And everybody kind of is on their own journey, you know?
Yeah.
But I always enjoy introducing Pete to people who had never heard of him, and that they really admire somebody of his backgrounds and of his qualifications to step up in that way. And then after the campaign ended, just talking to people like you and other supporters, you know, we're all just very proud of the fact that he got so far. It was so historic, you know, what he has achieved at that point. And that I was just really proud. I was really proud that I was able to help him get to the point that he did. And it's just unfortunate that he couldn't kind of ride on that coattails into the next round. But but you can't deny how far that he's going. So I was just really happy for him.
Yeah, it was kind of disappointing that we didn't hear the results until I think it was like days or maybe weeks later.
Terrible.
And then
Absolutely
that just
terrible.
bursted everybody's bubble, and he could have taken that momentum into, you know, to New Hampshire, and then people would have really known him by then in the other states. But
if he was like the very clear winner of that contest, then there would have been more media coverage, right? There would have been more fundraising,
right? So
I was upset that he kind of got screwed in that way. But again, the speech that he gave the night he suspended the campaign, again, it's just the grace that he showed. You know, like maybe he was having an internal fit, you know, but publicly he just was so poised and so graceful about it that that it just further reinforced that this is definitely the kind of leader that we want. You know, someone who could handle obstacles, someone who could handle defeats and losses and all of this, you know?
And do it graciously.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I mean, every time he goes on Fox News, right, he just sounds so nice and kind to those people, and but at the same time getting his point across in a very intelligent way, you know, so it always makes me proud when I see him on Fox News. It's been really cool just tracking his progress post campaign, and because he did his own podcast series, right? So I listened to that whole series. And then he came out with a new book, you know, read the book, and then he started his own PAC, Mundi Era, and so that was supporting a lot of other progressive candidates, and so I will follow that activity too. So it was great that he was still very much pushing his ideas and his values out publicly, and I mean, never in my mind would I think that he will become a cabinet secretary. You know, I was just like, maybe he'll become a consultant, maybe he'll become some kind of media pundit, or maybe he'll go into teaching like his dad was, or whatever, you know. But I never thought that he would become such a prominent person in an actual administration. And so I think that probably also just goes to show how he projected himself, you know, during the campaigns with all of the other candidates. That Joe Biden thought that he should be a cabinet secretary, you know? Yeah. So. Yeah, and when he was nominated for Secretary of Transportation, I was a little confused. It's like, well, transportation, why? And then the more I read about it, the more I understood kind of the big picture of Biden's agenda, which was to rebuild America with our roads and infrastructure and everything. And I thought, okay, well, that makes sense. And he would be a very good person to do that because he's been a mayor. He knows what it's like on a local level. You know, the things that people need, roads, buses, everything has to run smoothly. And so the way that he's been handling himself in that position, I thought, has been just really stellar in terms of the leadership that he's shown. And I know that one person I spoke to who is kind of part of DOT, I guess, on a state level, and they were just so excited that he was nominated for that position because of the last person in that position didn't do a whole lot. You know who that was, right?
Elaine Chao? Yeah.
Yes, yes. So they were very happy when he came on board. You know.
Yeah, so. I think he definitely just had a good combination of actual on the ground skills, being like an executive, you know, and having to kind of decide on the best policies on certain things, and then know how to delegate and how to like make those things happen, you know? So, so even though his city was like, you know, fairly small to medium size, like you still need the right foresight, right? You still need like the right vision for what these policies are going to do for the people that you govern, you know. So I know like a lot of people say like, oh wow, that's a really big jump, you know, from like a mayor of this city to like a, you know, secretary of the entire country. But I kind of feel like, you know, there's gonna be a ton of really smart people who would know how to scale things up, you know. But the important thing is that Pete would have the vision, you know, of like what they're trying to do, and that he could delegate all of those nitty gritty stuff and how to execute these things to the smartest people and the most experienced people, you know.
Yeah, and I feel like he's such a good problem solver too, because I remember the part in Chasten's memoir where he was telling Pete about all of his student loan debts and whatever else debt that he had. And then the first thing Pete did was he sat down, created an Excel spreadsheet of what the debt was and what the budget's going to be so that he can, you know, slowly get out of this debt. And I thought, wow, that's, you know, something that he sees the situation and he tries to solve it. So I feel like he has that vision and that, you know, push to try to solve this country's problems. You know, all the our systems are so broken right now. And a lot of his policies seem to be very visionary to me, especially the one about his Douglas plan about criminal justice reform. I thought that was really, really exceptional because it's kind of like a doctor looking at your problem and trying to get to the root of your problem and not just giving you something to mask your pain or your ailments, right? He actually looks at and that's what he does with that Douglas plan, is getting to the root of what's causing this problem that we have in our criminal justice system and why, you know, African American men or minority men are, you know, always in there, and how can we do to fix this? You know, for little crimes that shouldn't even be there. So that sort of vision, I think, was what really drew me to him, and the thought of him losing or just quitting that night, it was just so heartbreaking because I felt that tremendous loss for the country and just knowing, God, what amazing things he could do for this country if he was given the chance.
Yeah. Well, I definitely felt that a friend of mine, Andrea, she said that Pete has a destiny and it will be fulfilled one day, and that it could be, you know, it could be fulfilled incrementally over time, you know. So I think we all know, like in our hearts, that he will do big things, and it's yet to be seen what those big things are.
Right.
But I feel like he's already been on the fast track. Yeah, I was at a canvas several weeks ago for some people that are running for state assembly and state senate in the South Bay, and these are very progressive candidates. And so I talked to one of them. I think this person is currently in the state assembly, and so this person is running for re-election. And so I just asked him, what was your trajectory? You know, were you on city council? Were you in student government or whatever? And then he said pretty much just like straight out of college that he knew he wanted to be in public service. And he went straight for the state assembly. Like that's where he thought he could make a difference. I was like, oh wow, okay. And then he mentioned Pete. He's like, yeah, and we had a guy who was the mayor of a small town who is now a cabinet secretary. You know, so like not everybody needs to have this very predestined path, or like preordained path, I guess. And you must check every single step on that path. You know, it was like, as long as you have the vision to get to where you need to go, it's like you figured out your path, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of sad that we're not, together anymore doing all this stuff, but it's kind of nice to have met all of the people who were part of Pete's campaign and just kind of checking in with each other from time to time. So that's been nice. Like, one of the things that I enjoyed most about his campaign was just meeting new people and having this kind of shared common value. Like, we all love Pete and that's why we're there. But at the same time, it's like when you're together with this group of people, it's like they just lift you up, and everything about them is like, we all adhere to the rules of the road, right? Respectful and being respectful to each other and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But it's just like whatever he's kind of representing us, right? And so whatever he does, we kind of do the same thing. And so when you have a leader who projects that kind of positivity, that sort of kindness, that respectability, then it kind of makes everybody else around him the same way, right? Whereas if you have a leader who's always trying to bully people, it's like, you become a bully too.
Yeah.
Right? And so I feel like, I think Mike, one of Pete's campaign manager, I think his name is Mike, he mentioned one time that Pete makes everybody around him better. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was such a great statement about him, because he does make everybody around him better. Because I remember...
I think he lifts everybody up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just every day waking up and, being part of the Facebook group and listening to people's stories and how he's changed their lives, and you could just feel the joy and hope and in people. And so I thought that was so nice, considering the 4 years that we've been through. I hadn't felt that at all. So that was the best part of being part of his team. Yeah. So tell me a little more about the activism and stuff, and political activism stuff that you've been doing since then.
Yeah, sure. So after P for America kind of folded, then I had to sort of think about how to continue my engagement, so to speak. And so I decided that it was really important to just kind of help with general, like, voter registration and voter turnout. I was writing postcards and writing letters. And one thing that I thought was very meaningful that I did for the November election was that I joined the voter protection team for North Carolina, because that was a really important swing state. And so what I did was I would contact voters who had issue with the absentee ballot, whether they didn't sign it or they just didn't do something right on their ballot, and therefore the ballot got rejected. And so I will help voters with what to do with that, either to encourage them to go vote in person. That's the quickest way to rectify the situation. Or if that's not possible, you have to ask for an affidavit or something to confirm that you are the voter who voted on that ballot, or that you have to just provide some other kind of documentation. And so this process is called curing. You have to cure your ballot. But then I've also been doing volunteer work with the Poor People's Campaign. And so this is a legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So I'm now deciding, do I want to continue being an activist? And if so, in what way? Do I want to go back to working in hospitality? Do I want to So I kind of have all these new experiences now and all these new skills. Like, not only do I have culinary skills, but I also have operations and administration skills. I'm like very good with technologies and different programs and stuff. So there's like lots of things that I could do. But I definitely know I'm committed to social justice. And so I want to continue being in that space, and possibly working on things related to climate or nutrition or just access to fresh food or working conditions and living wages for people in our industry, things like that.
Yeah, and so the events that you guys held in DC, I mean, was in front of Congress, the Congress building? I mean, did any of the Congress people come out to listen, or any senators come out to listen? I mean, who was your audience for? I mean, if it's just to talk about, the issues, who's listening, and are the people listening going to help you guys make the changes that you want?
Sorry, let me fix my hair real quick. Yeah, so the actions that were in DC, of course they were in DC because that's where the government is, right? But we also have a thing where we don't want to give the mic to elected officials because they would just end up hugging themselves. It's more so that we can generate press and to have the local media there cover it, and then of course to get it on social media, right, for people who are there. So like the more hits there are out there, the more likely that the people we're targeting are going to hear it and will see it as some fashion. The more frequent you are making these demands, like the more likely they're going to hear it, right? Because like you can't just ask someone once and they'll give it to you. You have to ask them several times, right? And so our group has actually been pushing for a summit for the president to attend that is going to address several issues. And so we've been pushing for that for quite some time. And that was one of the things that we asked for this past June. And so people from our group, know how to kind of push those messages out, so that people in his administration will hear it. And hopefully that will actually result in some kind of summit. So that's just one example. We're not here for just one day. We're here for a movement, and a movement is built over time. So.
Yeah, and it just seems like a lot of the stuff that you're doing, unless these people in Congress actually care about the issues, they're not. It just seems to me that they're not going to really do anything about it.
Yeah, I agree.
And so you have to kind of make sure you get the right people in there who actually do care and do something about it.
Yeah. So it's definitely a multi-pronged approach.
Yeah.
That you have to put the heat on people who are already there, because you have to make an effort to show accountability. Because like this is what democracy is about, right? It's like these people are put in office to do something, and when they're not doing it, they need to be held accountable. And so you need to put the heat on that. And of course, it's entirely up to them whether they do something about it, right? But then you have to make that showing. But then on the other hand, like, you also need to have the movement to get better people into positions, right? If those first group is just not ever going to hear you and help you, then you need to have another prong, right? So it's like you have to have multiple strategies going on.
Yeah. I don't know. It just seems like the people who are in office right now, we can't really rely on them for anything at this point.
Yeah, I think what you can rely on is if you have created enough heat and that you have created enough pressure that they feel they might lose their jobs. So it's all about like building up the power among people who are in the position to get these people out of their jobs. It's only if you have built up enough of that pressure that these people now feel like, you know what, it is now becoming a liability for me if I don't start supporting reproductive rights. And so like that kind of a switch takes time to build. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, I think what we are all striving for is that the power rests with people, right? And then so there are certain people that are hurting us and are not doing their jobs, and we are the people who are able to get them out. You know, so mm-hmm. It's like it's getting the right candidates to run for office to replace those people, and it's getting enough people to vote for those candidates so they can be in office.
Right. Yeah, totally. I mean, speaking of reproductive rights, I mean, what did you think of the Roe decision?
I think it's terrible. I think it's absolutely just like a shit show. And I am fortunate. Yeah. We are fortunate to live in a state that believes in bodily autonomy for all people. Right? And so we're very lucky in that way. But we will no doubt be inundated with people who are going to need our help because we have the resources to help them. And so it's going to impact all of us at some point. You know, even if you think you can easily get an abortion, what if there's like 500 people ahead of you that they have to serve? Mm-hmm. You know, right. So it's going to affect all of us at some point. And for me personally, who is very clear that I do not ever want to become pregnant, do not ever want to become a parent, being able to have access to the resources that can help me make that decision is really, really important. So for that to potentially be in jeopardy is absolutely crushing. And so I really feel for people that are going to be directly impacted by this, like very, very soon, in their states and in their cities. And but it seems like the warning signs have been there for a very, very long time. And so again, it goes back to what we're saying, that there are people who could have done something about it, but they didn't. And so we need to get people who will do something about it to do something about it.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's just really sad because I was listening to a program the other day about, and this person was saying that there was a story about this woman who lived in a red state, and she became pregnant, and she didn't want to have another child because she already has, I think, like 2. Mm-hmm. And so she had to travel all the way to New York to have the abortion mm-hmm. with her children mm-hmm. along the way mm-hmm. and had the abortion, came back home, went to work the next day. I mean, that's just insane to me that, mm-hmm. you know, she couldn't just have it done wherever she lived. And the fact that, and the impact that it's going to have on people who don't have the means or the financial means to travel is devastating. I mean, you hear about so many of these women already who have, you know, their own kids that they have to take care of. And then now on top of that, mm-hmm. they will have to have another child that they can't afford to take care of. So,
it's economic, racial, that injustice is tied up in so many things, you know, and that, and the impact is going to have on that child who was not planned, that was not wanted. And, the emotional fallout from that is going to be devastating for that child. You know, because even though this child arrived, I'm sure their mother would love them no matter what. But like at the end of the day, this was not a choice that she wanted.
Right.
you know.
Right.
And so it's terrible for the mother, it's terrible for the child, it's terrible for their entire family.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and if you don't have a car, if you don't have childcare, if you can't get time off, it's just it's tied into so many things that is inequitable and is lacking, right?
Right.
Like in where we are, and it's like if you don't have pay time off, like how are you gonna get this done?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, and it's ironic or interesting to me because, like on social media, whenever there's talk about abortion and stuff like that, and I sometimes read the comments, and a lot of them are from men, white men, Hispanic men, who say, "Well, what about the rights of the father? Doesn't he get a choice in this decision?" And I'm thinking, okay, well, that's fine if you want to be a part of it. When she has an abortion, when she wants to have an abortion, but where are you when she decides to keep the baby? Where are you with the child care payments? She has to sue you in court. The court demands that you pay child support. You don't pay child support. So what's that? Where are you when the child needs you? Yeah. So, I just feel like, okay, the men feel this way because the decision's already been made by the woman that she wants to have an abortion. So, really he has no say, but really it doesn't affect him, right? But what if she decides to keep the baby? Then where are you? You just run for the hills, right? Can't even track you down. So it's just, I don't know. It just seems like it's such a hypocrisy to me to say that.
Yeah, there's so much patriarchy in that, all wrapped up,
Yeah. I just thought that was a little disingenuous.
Oh, for sure.
Whenever
I mean, they could all
men say that.
Who knows?
Yeah.
It's all part of kind of, I'm sure there are men who legitimately feel that way, but a whole majority of them are probably all part of the right-wing propaganda,
Yeah. And I wonder about, these women who are so anti-abortion that, what happens if your husband gets his mistress pregnant? Are you going to raise the baby? Or are you going to send her to get an abortion?
Yeah. I don't think it's ever about that. Yeah.
No, it's not. But that's how they make it to be. And so it's like when it happens to you, then it becomes an exception. Then, you can do the opposite of what you're preaching.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it's a part of a coordinated cult.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm kind of glad to hear that more men are getting vasectomies, so.
Yeah. A good friend of mine, her husband did that early this year, and she said it's given both of them such peace of mind that it really contributed to like their marriage being stronger. And so, yeah, I mean that person who made the comments, like, what about the decision of the father? Like, why don't you make the decision to have a vasectomy? You can make that decision.
Well, I mean, this whole decision affects everybody, right? I mean, not just women, but men too. Because if they live in a red state where abortion is not legal and they get somebody pregnant and she's forced to have this child, they're responsible for this child for 18 years. And so I don't think a lot of these young men would want that responsibility. So it's going to affect them too.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, it definitely affects them. Yeah. I mean, some of them probably just think, oh, that's not going to happen to me. Or they can just easily just don't even acknowledge it. It's just, it all go, I feel like it's just, it goes to something deeper that, what is it that you think supporting a woman's right means there's less right for you? It's
Well, I think it's all comes down to controlling women
Mm-hmm.
and maintaining patriarchy. I mean, it's just insane to me that in 2022 that this could happen in our country.
Yeah. Well, anytime there's progress, there's always going to be pushback. Right? It's just unfortunate that this is a pushback that we've seen coming.
Yeah.
So that I think that's what makes it more hurtful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think even when I heard the leaked decision, it kind of like we all felt it, right? We knew it was happening, but I think that when it actually happened was when it finally hit.
Yeah.
Like you just got punched in the gut.
Totally. Yeah, because I had just come home from Philly the day before, like literally the night before, and then I've overheard that there's probably going to be some big SCOTUS decision the next day. And I was like, oh, could this be the Roe thing? And then the next day, like when I finally saw that, I was just like, I just started crying.
Yeah. Sorry, my dogs are.
That's okay. Can we wrap up in maybe 5 minutes?
Yeah. All right. I think that's good. We can maybe end here.
Okay.
If you've enjoyed this conversation, please be sure to subscribe so this channel can grow and I'll be able to share more stories with you each week. Thank you for listening.